Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Friday morning. We're heading into a holiday weekend that apparently is going to start with a storm and then end up really warm on Monday. Summer weather, golf weather starting Monday all week. I guess the temperature's going up into the 80s. So put on the sunscreen, get the shorts, get the golf shoes. Let's go. All right, we've got to start today with the NBA. We're going to have David Locke on later in the show. The radio voice of the Utah Jazz will join us coming up at 8 o'clock. And we'll talk playoffs with him. It feels like the Celtics series is over. Over really before it's begun. Pacers had a chance in game one. They let it get away in the last 15 seconds. And, you know, you can say, oh, they should have gotten it. But based on what happened in game two, I think it just reminds us that, they weren't going to win this series anyway. Celtics were better in game two, and then I think most importantly, Tyrese Halliburton left the game in the third quarter with what is apparently a hamstring injury. And he didn't return. He had this problem earlier in the year. Ironically, it was in a game against the Celtics, and he missed 5 games. If he misses anything like that kind of time now, I mean, I didn't think the Celtics were going to win the series. You didn't think the Celtics were going to win the series. And if the Pacers lose Halliburton, how would they possibly win the series? This feels like the Cavaliers losing Donovan Mitchell. You know, we didn't think they were going to win that series, and without him, there's no way they were going to win that series. It wasn't going to happen. So that's pretty disappointing. If you're the Celtics, well, the path is now clear, as it has appeared since, February. Pick a time in the regular season as the Celtics pulled away in the regular season standings. And obviously the regular season standings don't mean anything. Dallas upgraded their team at the trade deadline. Teams have injuries and miss guys for certain stretches. And certainly the Celtics have been missing Porzingis here in the playoffs. But they're just so much better than everybody else in the East, it doesn't matter. I remember PK and I talking with about probably a month left in the regular season and saying, man, if it ends up being Boston, Denver in the finals, that is just going to be 6 weeks of such anticlimactic playoffs. So, tip of the cap to Minnesota. I don't know if they'll get by Dallas or not. I thought they'd win the series. Obviously, they've dropped the first game at home. But even if they don't get through, they knocked Denver out. They gave us a wildly entertaining series and a bizarre series, an unpredictable series, unpredictable on multiple levels, but at least they shook up the playoffs. Now maybe Dallas will shake them up again by knocking Minnesota out because in the East, it's been really predictable. Boston went through the first round in 5, they went through the second round in 5, and now they're up 2-0, and the Pacers have been great at home. They have been great at home in the playoffs. Been terrible on the road, but they've been great at home. And now it's like, what are they going to do if they don't have Halliburton? Maybe he'll go all Willis Reed and come out and it'll be fine. Maybe it was nothing. But the fact he left in the third quarter and didn't come back leaves me with a bad feeling for this series. So, I always thought the Celtics were going to the final, and they're only 2 games away now. And without Halliburton, those 2 games could come pretty quickly. All right, we got Western Finals Game 2 tonight. We'll find out what Minnesota's made of. You know, it's if you drop the first 2 at home, there are a couple exceptions, but you're pretty much done in the playoffs. You lose the first 2 on the road, you still have a chance. It's not a great chance, but you still have a chance. Man, you drop them at home, you're usually really in trouble. Now, having said that, we just went through this bizarro land where Denver lost 2 at home, 1-3, and it looked like they were going to win the series in 6 and then got beat, so who knows. But I am intrigued to watch Dallas and Minnesota tonight. No doubt about that. All right, we'll talk more about the playoffs with David Locke coming up at 8 o'clock, and then also a little bit some of our theories on the offseason and how quickly the Jazz might juice up this rebuild plan, or one more year in the lottery because that draft is stacked and I don't want to give that pick away. We'll talk with David Locke at 8 o'clock. Jason Kreis will be along at 8:30. Real Salt Lake has been unbeaten in their last 10 games, 7 wins, 3 draws. But that's 24 out of 30 points. That is pretty awesome, which is why they're in first place and which is why they're 4 points clear of everybody else in the West. Having said that, Minnesota's played 2 fewer games. Minnesota's going on at a pretty good clip as well, averaging 2 points a game, just as RSL is. So we'll talk with Jason Kreis at 8:30 about what has keyed this run and giving up 3 goals against Colorado, is that a sign that they are about to lose their magic and their mojo? Because as much as they're scoring goals in bunches, and that's entertaining, they'd only given up 6 goals in the 9 games that started this streak. That is an awesome pace, a tremendous clip. Now, if that's going to start unraveling at the defensive end of the field, then the streak will probably unravel as well. We'll talk with Jason Kreis coming up at 8:30 this morning. We don't talk a lot of baseball here on the show, but I know everyone likes to talk bad refereeing and bad umpiring. Oh, did you see the end of the White Sox game? I mean, they're rallying, right? They're trying to rally in the 9th inning. There's 1 out, and then a pop fly, and the infield fly rule is called. And the shortstop, who's playing out on the at the back of the infield dirt, and with the shift, he can't go past second base, but he's right behind second base. And the runner at second looks up at the pop fly, and his eyes are forward. He's looking forward. He's looking in front of him, and he's looking up in the air, and he just starts walking back to the bag. And the shortstop comes in, brushes him lightly, and then goes around him and catches the ball, which he didn't need to do because the umpires called the infield fly rule, which means there were 2 on. There were runners at first and second. They could have intentionally dropped the ball and turned to double play. And if the guys don't run, they drop the ball and they turn the double play. And if they do run, well, you catch the ball and you double them off the bag and you get a double play. So because of that, baseball put in this automatic out on the infield fly rule. And this is a textbook case, right? The ball is like midway between the pitcher mound and second base on the grass. So it's an easy call, and the umpires make it. And then they call the runner at second out for interference. Well, he can't advance, and you already called the out. What is he possibly interfering with? Plus, he wasn't looking at the guy. He didn't even know he was there. The guy was coming from behind him, and he was looking forward at the ball where you would expect. Oh, the White Sox announcers lost it. The White Sox crowd lost it. I mean, in the era of replay, you think we're going to have a lot less drama. And Pete always talks about how he wants the drama. He loves the argument. Come out, kick the dirt on the shoes, yell, scream, flail your arms, have a tantrum. But and largely the replay is taken out. But this can't be reviewed, and it was a mess. It looked like a terrible call. It just looked like an absolutely awful call. But there you go. That is baseball for you. All right, the other thing that happened yesterday, well, a lot of stuff happened yesterday, but one of the other things that happened yesterday is the NCAA. They have settled. It started with the Big 12 and the ACC, then the NCAA. Now the other power leagues have signed off on it, so the power leagues are all set up to pay players. And we were wondering, we were going to call Riley and see if it went back far enough that he'd get paid. And then I saw the text from Hans, because I hadn't delved into the details of it. Hans has. Hans Olsen, noon to 3 right here on the Zone, had a reference to 2016. Apparently that's all the back pay will go, and Hans was pretty bitter. You can check his Twitter feed. Hans was pretty bitter about that since he played in the late 90s, early 2000s, and yeah, those guys aren't going to get any money out of this settlement. Going back, I guess, 8 years, and then going forward, players will get paid. So the last little bit of amateurism is gone. Now, how this is all going to work out, I'm still a little fuzzy. Once players are getting paid, are schools or conferences going to be able to pay even more? I suspect the answer to that is yes, but this all happened really quickly, and I haven't seen all the rules spelled out. And it may take some time. It may not impact this season, but man, college sports is changing so quickly. So quickly. But as it should. These guys went from generating thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to billions of dollars. Billions and billions. And I'm already reading stuff, and this isn't really a surprise. I think even, all you may know about the TV industry is that you have a TV. All you may know about the streaming services is that you have a streaming service. But the official people who are in the know are saying that the next TV deal is going to be much bigger. Yeah, really? Breaking news? Didn't we all assume that? It's the way everything's going. The NFL deal has just gone through the roof. The NBA deal is about to. It looks like they're about to triple their money. And the last deal was enormous. Remember how big the last deal was? And then it was all at once. They were going to kind of blend it in over a few years, and then there was back and forth between the owners and players, and they couldn't come to agreement, and the players just wanted the money up front. So suddenly the Warriors had money to sign Kevin Durant. They went from right up against the cap to plenty of room to add a superstar. Can't wait to see what happens this time. I can't wait. The league is tripling its network/streaming TV money, the national TV and streaming packages. Holy cow. I can't wait to see what happens next. So that's the big news, and the Big Ten will get another big raise in 5 to 6 years, and we'll see what teams/markets/rivalries they want to add. The one thing I do think is that they are sitting right now at a 16-team SEC and an 18-team Big Ten, and we see what Florida State and Clemson are doing. It's going to be a 20-team Big Ten, right? That gets us to 36. There are so many TV windows. And I just don't think they sound like big brands now. I just don't think the public is going to watch teams with losing records. So, however many windows you have, if you're going to have 10 TV windows, then you need 20 teams with winning records. I mean, the NFL, they got 32 teams. But the teams with losing records do not appear in the Sunday afternoon game or Sunday night. They try to keep them out of Thursday and Monday night. They get in there once in a while, and then we hear about bad ratings and bad streaming numbers, and the leagues complain, and they try to juice up the packages again. Mostly the bad teams get hidden in regionalized games Sundays. They are shown in the markets where they're the local or regional team, and they're really important, and that's the only time you see them. And they just regionalize those teams away. And when the Broncos are bad and they get regionalized away here into Salt Lake, you guys all complain about it. Well, not all of you do, but a lot of you do. And I get it. You want to watch the teams with winning records. And college football at 36 teams is not going to have enough teams that matter, enough teams with winning records to fill all these TV time slots. ABC's got 3 and ESPN's got 4. And CBS is going to have 2 and NBC is going to have 2. And Fox is going to have 3. And FS1 is going to have 3 or 4. Where are they going to get all these teams? I think they got to go. I think they got to go to 40 for sure. I really think they're going to 48. And as you go to 40, and Utah and BYU can't get in. As you go to 48, I think the odds of them getting in go way up. And I know there's a whole thing about, BYU and private school and religious school and lack of research, but more and more, the TV networks are calling the shots. And that just ups BYU's opportunities in my mind. And Utah's, I think their opportunities are pretty good too. I don't know if they can both get in at 48. I won't rule it out. And I don't know if they're stopping at 48. I don't think they're going much past it either. Got to figure that out. But I can see we're going to be at 40 in this decade. And I think when those TV deals are up at the end of the decade, I think it's going to 48. So we'll see how all that plays out. We've got to take a break right now. DJ and PK, this is 97.5 The Zone. And we are brought to you in part by Murdoch Chevrolet, serving Utah since 1926. Coming up next, wow. What a day for our friend Barry Trammell. We will tell you about that next and talk Big 12 football as Utah and BYU are in the same league again. We'll do that next. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK, brought to you in part by America First Credit Union. Get the official debit cards of the Utah Jazz, University of Utah Sports, Real Salt Lake, and more, exclusively at America First Credit Union. Well, Barry Trammell was scheduled to join us yesterday, and then we suddenly got word he was in the emergency room, so I wanted to give you an update. PK and I ended up talking Big 12 football without him. We're going to reschedule him for next week. But we did hear from him, and we know a lot of you love him because we see the stuff on social media when he comes on. He's very knowledgeable, and he's wildly entertaining. And he's just got that down-home twang. He says hilarious stuff. So apparently he's had a couple of situations where he's fainted, and he's passed out. And they're running some tests to find out, why that is. And if any of you have been through that, it can be a lot of things. It can be fairly serious. It can be dehydration. Just fainting, depending on what you fall and hit on your way to the ground, hitting a table or a chair or a counter or something can knock you out, and that alone is dangerous. So they're doing some stuff at that. He was feeling pretty good. He talked to Jake later in the day, so best wishes to him. Hopefully he'll rest up over the holiday weekend, and he wants to come on with us next week. We'll see how that goes and play it by ear and his health first and all that stuff, obviously. But PK and I did have the Big 12 conversation, and here's that right here on The Zone. We were discussing this earlier in the week.
Yeah.
5 teams that could easily end up in the Big 12 title game. But if you had to pick 2, Oklahoma State would be on the list.
Well, I'm a fanboy Utah. Oklahoma State, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done the research. I've got it all right in front of me.
The seventh-year quarterback.
11 starters return on offense. I don't think you can get many more than that.
That's about right.
10 starters return on defense. You've got 9 starters with at least 10 starts or more on offense. You've got 8 starters coming back with at least 10 starts or more on defense.
They have added depth in the transfer portal.
You got Ollie Gordon. He calls him Olive Garden. That's why Garden, but it's Gordon. He's the Doak Walker a winner. 1,732 yards rushing, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. You've got 7 offensive linemen who've made multiple starts. You've got 6 super seniors on the offensive line. Yeah.
This is it. This is the big year. It all lines up for Oklahoma State.
It should. I mean, we're here. We're just talking on paper now. None of these games are actually being played, obviously, but on paper, they should be
in the conference
heavy favored to be in. It doesn't matter, as we said. We've been saying finish first or second. Who cares? It doesn't matter. You don't get any advantage for finishing first over second, especially now with the the invitation into the playoff. So yeah, they should be really good. It's like a big old duh.
They're coming off a 10-4 season, 7-2 in the conference, and the top 3 teams of the conference, Texas, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma, well, 2 of them are gone. There's really no reason not to pick Oklahoma State.
Right.
Just been told Barry has had an emergency come up, so we're going to try to maybe get back to him in the next segment.
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever emergency you have, you can solve it in 30 minutes.
Maybe not. We'll leave that up to him.
I would talk about maybe another day.
Yeah. I would off what Yak just told us, but whatever. Yeah, I know. That's what he said.
Hold on. The ambulance is pulling over. Jeez. I appreciate his dedication, but he got an emergency.
He doesn't have to be that dedicated.
We're here every day.
My schedule is clear tomorrow.
So take care of your emergency. That Justin Zanuck, why hasn't he come on?
Got something more important to work on.
Yes, he does. For sure. 1,000,000 times more important. But, I mean, we can talk Oklahoma State. This is a team we've watched from afar anyway. But looking at the numbers and going through and just reading on them, and they put out a preseason prospectus, and you can really dig into it. Everything says, yes, this should be one of the 2 teams.
Should we start with a 7th-year quarterback?
Sure, if you want. Yeah, and it took a while for him to win the job. What's his first name, Yak?
Allen.
We're talking about Alan Bowman?
Yeah, I couldn't think of Allen. Yeah. I mean, I think, was it game 3 he became a full-time starter somewhere in there?
Yeah, they had like a 3-man
Yeah, one of them was Gundy's son, but
yeah.
I think those guys got beat out.
His son actually transferred.
Yeah, he did. Well, I mean, he wasn't going to beat out Bowman. Bowman took control and got it going on. He's the quarterback, obviously, so we focused on that. But the reason why I didn't remember his first name is because they got so many other guys that I didn't even write it down.
Well, they do have the Doak Walker, so that's the award for the best running back. They've got their starting wide receivers back. They also have a transfer from Oklahoma, which when we do get Barry on, talk to him about, is there as much juice? I assume there is. When there's a transfer between BYU and Utah, it's a story. And is it a big deal when a guy transfers from Oklahoma to Oklahoma State? I expect it is. Gavin Freeman.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a player. I mean, Utah's gotten transfers from Oklahoma, and they
don't pan out, right?
Yeah. We've gotten multiple over the years, so I get your point.
They're picking guys off of the Oklahoma roster, the Arkansas roster, the Indiana roster, and they won't all play, especially because, as you point out, they got so many guys back.
But yeah, I don't even know
are
that
these
they
guys
need them.
depth, or are these guys going to beat somebody out? I mean, they did lose 4 games, so they got a lot of starters back, but it's not the perfect football team. So maybe some of these guys will be an upgrade. And with injuries, maybe some of them will end up being starters, even if they aren't an immediate upgrade.
Where they need help is at the defensive line, because they lost a combination of 36 starts.
So if you're looking for something,
Yeah,
go there.
right. But linebacker, they got Nick Martin, first team All Big 12, sixth in the FBS with 140 tackles, 83 solo, which was third. Justin Wright, he's a seventh-year senior.
Another seventh-year senior.
Yeah. Cornerback, super senior, kid named Black's got 26 career starts. I mean, come on. They're loaded.
If you're looking for something, one reason they went 10-4 last year is they were really good in close games. We remember them beating BYU in overtime. They also beat Oklahoma 27-24. You may remember the storming of the field at the end of that game. And they ended up going 5-1 in one-score games. Now, maybe they're better and they don't play as many one-score games.
They are better. I mean, that was last year.
Yeah.
Whoop-de-doo.
But they got to where they got off a bunch of close games. You start having the ball bounce against you.
They'll determine.
Bounces the other way.
They'll determine where the ball bounces.
Or they're better and they're not in one-possession
They are
games. They're
better.
one-score games.
It's just a fact. They're better. Yeah. It would be shocking if they're not in the final. To me, the question is, who's the other team?
Utah.
Okay.
Kansas.
I would put Utah ahead of Kansas right now.
K-State, Arizona.
I would.
Or a shocker.
For me, I would go Oklahoma State, Utah, and it doesn't matter which order. It's irrelevant to me. I don't care who wins the regular season. It does not matter.
You're either in or you're out.
Right.
There's no home field advantage.
So if you want to say Utah's going to win, great. But you got to be one of the first two, and just to get in. And then we'll see at that point when we get to December who we like for that game. And then I would go Kansas State as my next runner-up. Kansas, if the quarterback is healthy, because they've got a lot of weapons. And then Arizona. That's the way I would dope it out.
Oklahoma State opens the conference season against Utah, and the very next week, that's September 21st, and the very next week they're at K-State. They don't play Kansas or Arizona. So if they get through these first two games and they're 2-0,
You like to do that.
good to go.
Yak and I laugh on you. Do that with every guy we come on that comes on. Well, this is you don't even know who's going to play in that game. The other guys could be out, and so those games could be 46-3. You have to wait until you get there. They're going to be good to go whether they get through it or not.
They have a bye week before they play BYU in mid-October. That's a Friday night primetime game.
Great. And who does BYU have the week before? Just go into the schedule. Scheduling is your thing. What do you got?
BYU the week before has...
You thought I was serious.
Yes. I'm going to treat you like you're serious. If you're going to do that...
People can look up the schedule
Arizona.
themselves. We got to give them
They're
something.
driving. They can't. They're driving. They've
They've already
busy.
looked it up. I mean, the schedule's been out for months.
They've forgotten.
I mean, we don't need. Did the Jazz win? We'll show you next. I mean, those days are gone.
Yep.
We got to give them opinion. We just don't read schedules. Got to tell them what we think about it. Tell me what you think about it. I like that. Well, if they get by 0-2 or 2-0, whatever, but because somebody plays somebody on October 16th, they can get that themselves. They don't need me to tell them that.
Right now they do. They're driving. They don't have it at their fingertips.
You stick with that.
I have. I will.
I wish you were driving right now.
Ha!
This is a team that is loaded. And that's what matters. It doesn't matter where they play, who they play. September 14th, November 87th, it doesn't matter.
November 87th.
Yes, those are just dates. And this is a team that, if they're not playing in Dallas, is a disappointment. And that's all that matters.
Well, that part can't really be debated. I mean, that's the target. The two teams they've been chasing forever, they think they're ready to inherit the mantle because the two teams they're chasing are out. Texas and Oklahoma have taken off. And they've been really close. I mean, Oklahoma State's been really close I mean, the two coaches in that conference opener, those aren't just longest tenured guys in the conference. Those are the longest tenured guys in the country. I mean, they're coming up on 20 years now.
Yeah, I think the guy over at Iowa's got them.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I think they were hired within days of each other.
And the programs have taken a somewhat similar arc. And now they're ready to square off. Assuming one of these other schools doesn't throw themselves in the way.
Oh, I think that's possible. Yeah. These are not locks. This is, what was it 2018? Utah received like 33 of the 36 votes. SC was down at that time, the Clay Helton run. And Oregon was going through some changes there too. So they were the overwhelming favorite, and they delivered on that, at least in the regular season anyway. And it won't be the case this year. I do not think these two teams will run away and hide. They could, but I don't see it. I see it being far more competitive than that. But nevertheless, if I'm putting money down, those would be the two teams that I'm picking right now, irregardless of order, because it's irrelevant. And then go at that point, see what happens. But there's going to be teams that will give them great games. And I've already listed them. And then, I don't know enough about the Big 12. I always used to say with the Pac-12, there's always going to be 2 or 3 head-scratchers. And I said that because I had a 30-year history of intensely following the conference. No doubt about it. I had worked in 2 markets covering the conference before I got here. And I think by and large, that proved to be true. I don't know, and no one can really know now because the Big 12 is bigger than 12, and they've never had this. So last year I felt I was at a disadvantage relative to other people who covered the Big 12, but not this year.
Because Barry Trammell does not have a long history on the UCF Knights.
Right, it's precisely. Thank you.
Or the Arizona State Sun Devils.
All across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Half the league is new in 2 years, in a 2-year window. There's 16 teams, and 8 of them weren't in the league 3 years ago.
Right. So in that respect, it becomes a wash. You know, Utah hasn't gone to these places. Well, those people haven't come here. And so that stuff, but I do think there's going to be adjustments that are involved in that things are going to happen which we didn't see. And it's going to be impossible to get the level of knowledge on the Big 12 as we've had with the Pac-12. It's just going to be impossible.
For multiple reasons.
Yeah. I could go, and I've told this story, the sandwich shop in Hawthorne, California, and the guy, big kid, Polynesian kid, talk to him. Yeah, I'm being recruited. Come back the next week, because I was down during Pac-12 Media Day. Come back the next week when Kalani was coaching at Utah, ask him about the kid. He recites 5 different things. There's no way if I should end up being in a sandwich shop in Orlando, Florida, and I see somebody who's big, and I say to him, yeah, I'm being recruited. What's your name? Joe Blow. And I come back, and I ask Morgan, hey, do you know about Joe? Whereas they knew everybody on our side of the country.
But now how are they going to know everybody in Iowa, everybody in West Virginia,
across the
everybody in Florida?
The whole country.
It's not going to happen.
Right. So I don't think any of us are going to have the intense depth of knowledge that when we're just going to have to roll with it. Because we're not going to be at disadvantage because everybody's going to be at the same disadvantage.
And on top of that, the recruiting the high school kid isn't everything the way it used to be. With the transfer portal now, stuff is changing so fast.
But I still think that's your backbone.
It is.
I don't think anybody who brings in 40 transfers is going to be successful.
I agree. But in the year that you lose 3 people in the D-line, if you're rolling the way Utah's rolled, which I think is really unusual, okay, they probably have the depth and 3 more guys step up, and then there's 3 guys behind them to be the backup. But I think the more normal thing in college football now is some of the replacements are coming in from the transfer portal, and somebody's coming from a quote-unquote better program and quote-unquote moving down, and as you just pointed out early in the segment, well, that's no guarantee of success. Oklahoma guys transferred to Utah when they were in the Mountain West and couldn't get on the field and didn't look great when they did. But sometimes those guys moving down take off.
Or guys who move up take off.
We've seen here Weber State guys go to BYU and look good in the Big 12. They were just in the biggest guy. They skipped right over the Mountain West.
Oh, people are talking about this Jack Kelly going to be a star for BYU at linebacker.
And it seems like...
And Vongachong, I guess you consider him moving up a little bit from Mountain West to Big 12 last year. He was a very nice player.
And if you just look at the MAC all-conference team, the Power League's
Ronnie Mack has an all-conference team?
No, the Mid-American Conference.
Wouldn't surprise me if he did.
It wouldn't surprise me either, actually.
The guy's a lifer.
Probably's got all-region high school teams. You start talking to him about, this school's doing well because they hired the defensive coordinator away, and he was the guy getting all the kids from outside the area. And Mac knows it, and when he says it to you, you're like, I'm not going to argue with you. You clearly know this.
Right.
But no, it's the Mid-America Conference, and they get rated by the power schools. If you're all conference in the MAC and you're a sophomore, you're getting phone calls. There's no, even juniors. You only have to have 1 year of eligibility left. They'll come for you.
Ronnie Mack was the guy that told me, they're going to hire Bronco. Just no question.
Yeah.
I mean, guy's an encyclopedia. And encyclopedias are full of fact. Not Wikipedia, but encyclopedia. Look it up, youngsters.
Old school.
Yeah. And that's who Ronnie Mack is and was and still is. So from that perspective, that's what – and that to me, that makes it a little bit more fun. Get some new things. I'm sad that the conference went away. I'm sad for Ute fans because the fact is, going to the Arizonas and going to the Californias, not only are they shorter, but, nothing against some of these places, but – these places are cooler, and because you can combine multiple things, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It just wasn't. It's like going to Vegas.
The number of people who went down to a USC or UCLA game and tag teamed it with either a Dodger game or a NFL game,
or just a ride on a bike along the Strand.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't ride along the beach in Iowa.
Yeah.
I would
got a lot
see
of things.
Them. It doesn't have a beach.
Yeah. I would literally see them at the Hermosa Pier. And they'd say, hey, PK, and we would talk. Mm-hmm. And it was always fun to do that. Tempe with Mill Avenue and all that stuff.
It's fun to travel with your team.
It's fun to travel with your team, and it's fun to stay at the YMCA. Those are two things you can count on. You know what I mean? There was the last time the Devils beat the Utes was in Tempe. And so I got my sister, my wife's friend that you've heard me talk about for years. You practically know her, even though you never met her.
I have no idea. I have no idea if she's short or tall or what color her hair is.
Right.
But it's to the point now that I had a former intern walk up and start describing somebody to me that in the pickleball world. I said, is her name Jill? And he said, yes.
Yeah. And so she had her husband and son. I had my sister and her guy. And we're sitting in outdoor. It's in November. We're in outdoor place eating, and we're relaxing. I'm having a good time. And over the next table, I could see Ute fans, and they're looking at me. And I look at my sister. I said, I gotta go talk to them. She said, why? It's just because. Oh, okay, I get it. And so there it was, and they were upset with the loss. I get it. So I was trying to console them, and blah blah blah. And I think that was the year Hundley got hurt. And so really derailed the shoulder, I think.
It derailed a good year.
Yeah,
because that was a day game, so that would have made sense.
Right. So I just don't know that I'm going to see that to that level. I get that. But aside from that, these games are going to have some intrigue maybe. So I would say just jump aboard. You're going to have a good football team, and BYU's already in, so they don't have to tell them to jump aboard. They're ecstatic that they got there. They didn't give up a Power 5. They didn't see their conference demise the way we did here. But I think in time you'll come to it won't be the same.
Well, it literally
but we've
might
had
not.
2 years to adjust it not being the same.
It literally might not be the same again in another 4, 5, 6 years. So
who knows?
Change is the only constant.
Yeah, really.
But it sucks that It sucks for no other reason than it was just so easy. You're basically an hour and a half away from 2 hours away from every conference game. And now you're not. Cross country. I mean, it's just not that easy to go across country. It was so convenient. Just hop on a plane and
it's
an hour and a half later.
But what are you going to do? Yeah, what are you going to do?
When we come back, we are talking Western Conference Finals. What is Minnesota going to do? Ben Beecken covers the Timberwolves. He's up next. Good morning, DJ and PK. Ben Beecken joined us. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for Locked On, the Locked On Wolves podcast. And we talked to him after the Game 1 loss in preparation for Game 2 tonight. We had him on late in the show yesterday. For you early risers, here's Ben. Ben, we are curious here. There are many people here rooting for Rudy Gobert and also for Mike Conley. Maybe a couple for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Maybe. But the Game 1 where it was totally winnable and then it gets away in the last 3 minutes. There are teams that would come out of that and be devastated and the series would be over. There are teams that would come out of that and say, we are plenty good enough to do this. There's 6 games left. Let's go get it. And they do. You listen to them talk. You watch their body language. You've been watching all their games all year, and you get a vibe for if they're telling you the truth or if they're just trying to say the right thing. Which of those scenarios is most likely for the Wolves right now? It's over, or they know they can do this.
Yeah. I mean, I would go with the latter. I think you just look back to the last series, right? I mean, the first round was an easy sweep over Phoenix. It ended up being a lot easier than anyone thought it would be. But then second round, you win the first 2 in Denver. And already taking victory laps, doing all the national media circuit about how the Wolves, what if they sweep Denver? And then they lose 3 straight, including 2 on their home floor. And they're down 3-2. The odds completely flip. Massive, Denver becomes the massive favorite in the series. And yet they come back and dominate Game 6, win by like 45 points on their home floor, and then go to Denver in 7 and win a close game. Or a big comeback, down 20 plus in the third quarter, and they come back and win. So this team's shown that exact resiliency that they need to show now. And it absolutely is frustrating that they lost Game 1 because it was very winnable. Dallas was 24% on threes. Nobody besides Luke and Kyrie really scored for Dallas. You had, contributions from Jaden McDaniels and guys like that you don't normally get a whole lot from offensively. And yet you still lose the game. But then you look up and it's like, well, we only lost by 3. And, Luka was crazy in the final couple of minutes. And this was one of the worst games they've played in the playoffs. I mean, it was a fun game, but there were a lot of things the Wolves left on the floor. And given the resiliency they've showed to this point, especially in that Denver series after losing 3 straight, winning 2, this is exactly the sort of thing. And you'd expect there to be a bit of a Game 7 hangover, right? I mean, it was just Sunday. They won a Game 7. Dallas had an extra day of rest. So that all plays into it as well. So I think they're well positioned to bounce back in Game 2.
You look at Anthony Edwards, right, and it's been a breakout nationally for a lot of people who hadn't heard of him. The rest of us who do this for a living know he was number 1 pick from Georgia, blah, blah, blah. And so here he goes. You look what he did in the first 2 playoff series, 51% from the field against Phoenix and 50% against Denver, right? For someone who takes a lot of perimeter shots, that's awesome. Now, 2 games in a row, he 25% in the closeout game, 6 of 24, although he did hit a big 3 there from the corner. That was impressive. He still does other things, but the shot wasn't falling. And then in Game 1, the shot wasn't falling. Now, I don't think that this is devastating to him, but how much does he have to adjust knowing now he is a big-time focal point of the other team's defensive strategy, plus this is the biggest stage that he's been on?
Yeah, I think I don't worry as much about that. And he is 22, and it is the biggest. I mean, everything you said is 100% correct, but I think he's got the right mentality to handle it. And that's a big reason why he has become such a star nationally, because he generally, he generally walks the talk, right? He backs up what he says. And, this is a couple straight inefficient scoring games, but everything else about the last 2 games from him has been good. I mean, he locked up Jamal Murray in the second half of Game 7 against Denver. Game 1 against Dallas, Kyrie kind of went off. I think he had 24 in the first half, but then in the second half, he only had 6. And I think that played into Ant just looked exhausted. And that's not an excuse. It's the reality of being a 2-way player And he's one of the few guys in the league that puts in that much effort on both ends of the floor and has the success that he does. And clearly he was just gassed in the second half of this game. And, it's a little concerning because they did have the 2 days off, but you're still coming off of, Game 7 and all that stuff and the home crowd and the adrenaline and that wears off in the second half. So I would expect a strong bounce back game from him. But again, like the 6 of 24 in Game 7 and the 6 of 16 in Game 1 of the conference finals, but the rest of the line looks good. I think he had 7 assists to 1 turnover in Game 7. In this game against Dallas, he had 11 rebounds, 8 assists, only 3 turnovers. So he's still largely making the right decision with the ball in his hands. But he only attempted 4 2-point field goals in this game against Dallas. He had shot 12 threes and only 4 twos, and that was a function of him just being tired, and it was just easier to shoot threes than it was to take a pounding in the paint. He only attempted 2 free throws. Those are things I think we'll see flip. I think we'll see the shot selection improve a little bit for Ant. And overall, he's been good defensively and sometimes great. He's been good as a distributor with the ball in his hands, sometimes great. So I don't worry about him being on this stage. I worry about him getting worn down with the number of minutes he's played, but I would expect a strong bounce back from him in Game 2.
Ben, you're covering the Wolves there, and you know as well as anyone, there was not a lot of love in the huddle when punches were being thrown. How have they gone from that to the Western Conference Finals, and now it looks, from the outside looking in, it looks like a pretty tight group. How did that transformation happen?
Yeah, I think that last year, it's hard to say it was blown out of proportion because anytime that there's a physical altercation is maybe a strong word, but a physical interaction like that on the bench where it led to Rudy Gobert actually being suspended for the play-in game last season by the team, that's obviously significant, but you listen to the team at the time and they said all the right things publicly and like, hey, this was a heat of the moment thing. And then they, uncovered some of it. Like a lot of that stemmed from Rudy just didn't have a great year last year. And that's been well documented. He was worn down from Eurobasket and was never fully healthy and acclimating to a new city and all that stuff. And now this year, actually kind of ironically, Kyle Anderson, who was at the other end of that interaction on the bench last year in Game 82, he actually has had a much worse year than he did last year. And Rudy's been fantastic. So I think it was just kind of a heat of the moment thing. And for the most part, this team, they are closely knit, right? Like Mike Conley was still new to the team at that point when that happened last year. He'd been on the team for like 2 months, and now he's been on the team for another full year. And he's, as you guys know, like a glue that holds everything together. And him and Ant have a great bond. Anthony Edwards has continued to grow as a leader, and everybody else has kind of found their roles. They've got this interesting balance. I mean, they're talked about as this young team, and they are because their best player's 22 and doing stuff that we haven't seen 22-year-olds do hardly ever in the history of the league. But a lot of these support guys, I mean, Rudy's in his early 30s, and Mike's in his late 30s, and Cat is in his prime. He's like 28. So like, a lot of the best players, a lot of the key role players aren't actually that young. It's Jaden McDaniels, it's Ant, and it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker that are the ones, and Kyle Anderson's of that too. So it's really kind of the perfect blend, and most of this team's been together for a year. In fact, that rotation, nobody in the playoff rotation is new to the team this year. They were all on the team last year at the trade deadline or prior. So it's also just longevity, having the group together, having the same coaching staff, I think has gone a long way.
Most folks follow the NBA thought Dallas really got better at the trade deadline, picking up Gafford in Washington. Plus, Lively has been a great addition to this team. Gives them another live body, no pun intended, obviously. And I think he's an X factor in this particular series. The Wolves got big guys of their own, and Naz Reid coming off the bench is a very good player. But I think Dallas is far more physical and tougher than they've been in recent years. How does Minnesota combat and deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's maybe my biggest question right now. Now, I part of the reason I think they certainly can do it is because that series against Denver was extremely physical, and I mean, it was physical, but it was weird in the sense that Nikola Jokic is really the only big that Denver has. They don't have any backup bigs, but they play physically as a team. Like Aaron Gordon's a physical player. They tried to guard Ant with physicality. And I was expecting Dallas to be a little shell-shocked by the Wolves because they dealt with OKC, who's obviously a smaller and slighter team. OKC plays physical for, Lou Dort's a physical player, but they don't have as many bigs. So I was expecting them to be maybe a little shell-shocked with the Wolves initially, but I do think fatigue played into it. I think that Wolves we'll see a more physical team in game 2, and this team has tended to play better with their backs against the wall, which is frustrating at times because, like, hey, if you just play like this all the time, that whole thing, like, it wouldn't be so difficult. You don't really want to go to a game 7 again, but this is going to be a long series. It's going to be 6 or 7 games, and while Dallas has a little bit more athleticism and youth and length when it comes to, well, not more length, but more athleticism and youth, at least more bounciness when it comes to Lively and Gafford and Derek Jones Jr. and guys like that. I think that the overall size of Rudy, Nasri, Karl-Anthony Towns coming at Dallas over and over should be enough to wear them down over the course of the series. The points in the paint were won easily by Dallas in this game, and that was more an indictment on when Rudy was off the floor than when he was on. I think single game plus minus isn't always a great indicator, but in a game the Wolves lost by 3, Rudy was actually a plus 10. And they still allowed 60-plus points in the paint. So Rudy didn't have his best game, but when he was off the floor, there was no paint protection for Minnesota, too many second chance points, too many easy baskets in the paint for Dallas. So the Wolves just need to up the physicality, but they certainly can do it. I mean, Denver's one of the more physical teams in the league, and the Wolves ended up beating them in a series. So, but that to me is one of the big things to keep an eye on here moving forward.
Dallas has 2 players who, when they're on, and they're on in game 1, they are just offensive machines and remarkably efficient. And how does Minnesota combat that? And I think the answer is, well, have more possessions, get more shots. And to do that, you got to dominate the backboards. And given the fact Minnesota has 2 7-footers and I think, 3 6'9" guys, and the team's athletic. So if you've got to battle for the old school rebound at the front of the rim, Minnesota's built to do it. And if you're chasing down long threes, I still think Minnesota's built to do it, but they got out-rebounded 48-40. Do you see that trend holding up? Neither Gobert or Towns got to double figures in boards. It seems that Minnesota's going to win games and win this series. They've got to own the backboards.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, and rebounding is something that, weirdly enough, has kind of come and gone for the Wolves this year. I mean, they finished the year top 10 in defensive rebound rate, as they should, as you listed. Like, they're a huge team. But that has been a weak spot at times. Occasionally the perimeter players, especially, I would say, Jade McDaniels and occasionally Conley and in the regular Alexander Walker, and in the regular season, their backup point guards that were in the rotation. Those guys didn't rebound their positions well enough. Cat's got to do a little bit more on the glass, but what ends up happening is some of these guys get pulled out on the perimeter and are aggressively defending there and not recovering in time to get a defensive rebound. That's one of the reasons McDaniel's rebound numbers aren't where they should be for as big and athletic as he is. But that was something I was concerned about in the Phoenix series with Yusuf Nurkic, and the Wolves did a great job of crashing the defensive glass. It was up and down in the Denver series as expected because they're a really good rebounding team. They did a great job of keeping Aaron Gordon off the glass in that series. So it is one of those things that, and like offensive turnovers are a couple of the things throughout this season that have kind of come and gone for Minnesota. It's nitpicking because they were the best defense in the league by a long, wide margin. But if they can hold their own on the defensive glass, I do think the athleticism and the activity of some of these Dallas frontcourt players that we just talked about, like, that is a bit of a surprise, not surprising, but a shock, I guess, to the system after playing a bruising team with more size and less athleticism, like a Denver, and even Phoenix too was like a weird combination of that, where it was Nurkic and then a bunch of perimeter guys. Durant playing a lot of center in that series. So this is just a different animal, and the Wolves need to consistently crash the glass with effort and not just rely on their size and expect to get some rebounds. I think at moments in this game 1, the Wolves looked like Denver did in game 7, where they were just kind of stuck in mud, not boxing out, and Dallas got some easy second chance opportunities. So, and to your point, to get easy buckets in transition, that's going to be important too. And you have to get a defensive rebound in order to do that. And that's got to be better in the next game. But I have confidence that it will be. It's just one of those things to keep an eye on over the course of the series. And if they're going to lose a game, that's going to be one of the ways they lose it is by not, rebounding on the defensive end of the floor well enough.
In terms of in-game coaching decisions, who's actually making them?
It's mostly Chris Finch, at least in timeouts, and you could see this actually on the TNT broadcast before end of game situation. Like, you could see Norrie lean back. They showed, and Finch had out the whiteboard and said, was basically like saying, let's run this, and like told them whatever play call. So the game planning and stuff is still being led by Chris Finch. The in-game, at least in the timeouts, those adjustments, Chris Finch is having his say in those. Obviously, on the floor, if it's calling a set as the team comes down the floor, that's got to be Mike Norrie. And the way they've described it is just kind of a partnership where Finch is leading the way just like he normally would leading into the game in terms of the overall game plan, and then Norrie's making the on the fly, pull the player aside during a free throw attempt or tell Mike Conley what play we're going to run down the floor. So it is a combination, and Norrie deserves a lot of credit, but Chris Finch is absolutely still involved. It's just the mechanics of it are a little bit more complicated than they were, a few weeks ago.
Ben Beecken, host of Locked On Wolves, covering the Minnesota Timberwolves, joining us here. Anytime you're this close and you're one of the last four teams, you got to treat it like it's your only chance to win a title because these things don't come around and you never know. In the case of Minnesota, they do have older guys. They have a very expensive payroll, and maybe they'll surprise us and they'll pay all those guys and pay all the luxury tax and just write the checks like the Warriors have and not worry about it. But do you think there's a good chance that this is this Wolves team's only chance here and they're going to make money decisions and kind of break up the band in the offseason? What do you think?
That's so tough. I mean, if you had asked me that, if they lost in the first round, I would have said a good chance, absolutely. And now I would say there's certainly still a chance because there is the ownership kind of tug of war going on that won't be resolved probably until midsummer. I think July sometime is kind of when everybody's expecting there to be a mediation. But now, depending on what that actual tax bill is, I mean, it's hard to like the easy way to overcome this would be, trading Karl Anthony Towns because he's the biggest salary. Like you're more likely to trade him than Anthony Edwards. He'd be easier to trade than Rudy Gobert. And you just invested this much in Rudy. So Cat is the easy one. You also could trade Naz Reid, but at this point his contract looks really valuable. Jaden McDaniels is the other one with an extension kicking in, but you're not going to trade him, especially he scored 20 plus 3 straight games for the first time in his career now. And it'll be interesting to see how much, I mean, you make a great point. These opportunities don't come around that often. And if you think you can run it back and be in the top 4 again next year, which with the youth on this team, that seems, plausible, then it's hard to justify trading one of, your second best player in Karl Anthony Towns or your second best offensive player at least. So it's really going to be interesting. And I think Wolves fans have kind of, a few weeks ago, we were having this discourse in Wolves Nation about what is this going to look like? And now nobody's really talking about it because let's enjoy the ride. Let's see where this goes, knowing that you're going to have to pay the piper at some point here. I think sitting here right now, assuming they don't get just if they were to get swept, maybe the recency bias here would lead me to say maybe they do not blow it up, but trade Cat or something like that. Sitting here right now, I think it's more likely that they pay something of a tax bill next year and they, Kyle Anderson's a free agent. He's not going to come back. Alexander Walker's on an affordable contract. You can make some moves around the edges. They've got some younger guys that have been sitting on. They could do the Denver thing, right? Denver played a bunch of rookies off the bench, but then they got to the playoffs and they didn't trust those guys. So, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think that they try and trim around the edges and reduce the tax bill. But at this point, I'd be surprised if they trade Karl Anthony Towns this offseason, unless something drastic changes.
Well, Ben, enjoy the rest of the series. However this thing plays out, we appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.